Hey, estate planning attorney Paul Rabalais here, and in this video we're going to talk about 5 specific duties that a trustee of a trust has. So, I get asked questions like this all the time. Somebody comes in, they say, Paul, I got a question I need to ask. I'm involved in a trust, I'm a beneficiary of a trust, and so is the trustee. So might be the beneficiary's mother, stepmother, stepfather, father, cousin, aunt, uncle, brother, corporate trustee. And so they'll say, Paul, let me tell you what the trustee did. They did this, and then Paul, can they do that? So this addresses those trustee duties and again, what duties a trustee of a trust has. Now, a couple of things at the outset. Many trust instruments define what the trustee duties are. There's likely to be a section in the trust instrument that defines what the duties of the trustee are, and that section might be a page long, or it might be 30 pages long. Or in absence of specific trustee duties in the trust instrument, then you have to look to the trust law to define what those trustee duties are. Some trusts will have language that says the trustee is bound by the duties that are defined in the applicable trust law. So you have to look at all of that. Now, I will say that provisions in a trust that limit a trustee's duty of loyalty to the beneficiary are typically ineffective. Couple of other points, and as I go through these examples, know that these trustee duties generally don't apply when someone has a revocable trust. A lot of trusts out there where the person setting up the trust, they transfer assets to their trust. They are the trustee. The trust is revocable. A lot of these trustee duties don't apply to that trustee of a revocable trust because, quite frankly, the trustee who is also the settlor can revoke their trust, put everything back in their name. So there really are no duties to others that the trustee of a revocable living trust has. But nonetheless, let me go through, in fact, let me go over maybe a couple of scenarios where these duties do apply. So oftentimes, maybe grandfathers either left as a bequest assets to a trust, let's say for his grandchildren, and grandfather named his son as the trustee of that trust, and the grandchildren are adults. So the son is going to have a duty that we'll talk about here in a minute to preserve assets for the benefit of the grandfather's grandchildren, and we'll talk about what those duties are. Another common example is when a husband, for example, leaves his estate when he dies to a trust for perhaps his wife for her lifetime, and then perhaps when his wife dies, back to his children, and his wife, his surviving wife, may or may not be the mother of his children. So whoever the trustee of that trust is must abide by the duties that I'm about to talk about here in a moment. And that trustee of that trust might be his surviving wife, might be one or more of his children, might be some other third party, might be a corporate trustee, but they're bound by these duties. So let me go through 5 particular duties that a trustee of a trust has. The first one I'm going to talk about is a loan. And our trust law is specific that says an individual trustee shall not lend funds to himself, his relative, employer, employee, partner, or business associate unless the trust instrument provides otherwise. So if you're the trustee of a trust and there's $1 million in the trust, you can't just say, you know what, boy, I could use maybe a $500,000 loan, pay off some debts, I'll get around to paying that back to the trust when I get around to it. Can't do that. The only way you can, as trustee, you can personally borrow money from the trust is if the trust instrument provides it. And because you have a duty of loyalty to the beneficiary, if you're going to do that, because the trust instrument provides it, it better be an arm's length transaction, appropriate collateral, interest rate, that kind of thing. So really it's frowned upon loans by a trustee from the trust. Number 2 is a sale. And so again, an individual trustee shall not directly or indirectly, buy or sell property for the trust from or to himself or all those other people, his relative, employer, employee, business associate, and partner, unless the trust instrument provides otherwise or it's authorized by a court. Now, you see this one apply from time to time. And a common example is mom and dad die. They had a trust. They both passed away. They have 4 children. They leave the trust assets to the 4 children equally. Oldest child is the trustee of that trust now that mom and dad have passed away. And let's say oldest child says, I'd like to buy mom and dad's house from the trust. And so perhaps either trust law or the trust instrument may prohibit that. If it does, then I think what oldest son would have to do is he would have to distribute or transfer that home from the trust to the 4 children so that the 4 children would be co-owners. And then oldest child could purchase each of his siblings 1/4 interest from that sibling of his. So that might be the way to kind of get around the I can't buy property from the trust provision. Trust duty number 3, the accounting requirements. This requirement is almost never met by individual trustees. So a trustee has a duty to keep and render clear and accurate accounts of the administration of the trust. And at least once a year, that trustee must render a clear and accurate account covering his administration for the previous year. So I've had people come into the office, Paul, I'm a beneficiary of a trust, and my brother is the trustee. I haven't heard from him in 7 years. I don't know what he's doing. He probably squandered the trust, blah, 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 Crimea River. I'm like, man, 7 years and you haven't heard a word? What are you doing waiting 7 years to look into getting information about this trust that you are involved in? So be aware of that. A lot of individual trustees aren't even aware that they have this accounting requirement. So hopefully this video will make both trustees and beneficiaries aware of the trustee accounting requirement. Trustee duty number 4, the duty to furnish information. So the last one was about an annual accounting, and so this one is a trustee shall give to a beneficiary upon his request, and I'm going to refer to the actual provision of our trust code. Whoops. Let's see. Drop the old Scotch tape. A trustee shall give to a beneficiary upon his request at reasonable times complete and accurate information as to the nature and amount of the trust property, and permit him or a person duly authorized by him to inspect the subject matter of the trust and the accounts, vouchers, and other documents relating to the trust. So again, another scenario where if you haven't heard from that trustee in, let's call it years, you can require and request at reasonable times all of that information that you as a beneficiary would like to have from the trust, all of the accounts, all of the statements. Now, so if you haven't heard from the trustee in 3 years, I would say you're contacting the trustee and saying, I'd like to see a copy of all the accounts and other relevant information. I would say if you haven't heard from them in 3 years, that is a reasonable time to request that. Now, if you go every week and say, I want to see a printout of all the transactions every single week, that may not be reasonable. So it's kind of limited to this, you're required, that trustee shall give to a beneficiary upon his request at reasonable times, complete and accurate information. And then number 5, I'm going to refer to the trust code again. It's that just kind of that general prudent administration standard, because our legislatures, they can't legislate every single action that a trustee might take. So we have these fairly general prudent administration statutes that say a trustee shall administer the trust as a prudent person would administer it. In satisfying this standard, the trustee shall exercise reasonable care and skill, considering the purposes, terms, distribution requirements, and other circumstances of the trust. So that provision basically says a trustee has a duty to do what a prudent trustee would do, because there's so many different things that a trustee could do. They can't legislate every one, so they, of course, makes sense that they would have this prudent administrator rule. Okay, there's a few other trustee duties, but those are the ones I get questioned about the most. So here's the deal. If you have a question, if you are perhaps a beneficiary of some type of irrevocable trust, and you have a question as to what the trustee's duties are, I would, number one, look at the terms of the trust. And if you don't have a copy of the trust, shame on you. That might be the first thing you'll want to request, because every beneficiary is entitled to have a copy of the trust instrument. So number one, look at the terms of the trust instrument. Number two, if the trust instrument does not address what that trustee's duty is, or at least the one that you're inquiring about, then look to your state's trust law to see if your state's trust law addresses that particular trustee duty that you're inquiring about. So that ought to get you straight. And if you're at the point of questioning a trustee's duties, then you're probably going to want to be in the mode of making sure that you obtain the required annual accountings from the trustee. You may at other reasonable times want to request other information that would give you the peace of mind that hopefully that the trustee is performing as that trustee should, because they're bound by that prudent administration rule to do what a prudent trustee would do. So that gets you started on trustee duties. And the other thing that you want to do is really two things. One, smash the like button, turn it from gray to blue. That'll tell YouTube, show my video to more people. And then number two, if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss anything as I keep cranking out more estate planning, trust, probate, estate settlement videos, so you can make much better informed decisions as you decide what to do for yourself and for your family. We'll see you next time.